5 world champion bloodlines crumbled before Bodacious. Veterans quit. Legends fell. Then 22-year-old Lane Frost raised his gloved hand. What happened in those 8 seconds changed rodeo history forever and proved why some cowboys are simply born different. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Have you ever faced something everyone said was impossible? Let's ride. The Cheyenne Frontier Days arena buzzed with tension as thick as the Wyoming dust hanging in the July heat. 5 generations of rodeo royalty sat in the stands, their championship belt buckles catching the afternoon sun. But their faces told a different story. These weren't the confident grins of men who'd conquered the sport. These were the haunted expressions of warriors who'd met their match. "That's Tommy Morrison," whispered a young cowboy to his buddy pointing toward the first row. 3-time world champion, Bodacious threw him in under 2 seconds last month. Separated his shoulders so bad he's still wearing that sling. Morrison stared at the empty arena, his jaw clenched. Next to him sat the Prescott family, 4 generations of bull riders whose names were etched in every rodeo hall of fame from Texas to Montana. Jake Prescott, the patriarch, had ruled the sport in the 70s. His son Danny dominated the early 80s. Even young Mark Prescott, fresh off his first world title, had tried his luck against the Black Beast. All 3 had lasted less than 3 seconds combined across their attempts. The Henderson brothers occupied the next section, their matching championship rings dulled by shame. These twins had revolutionized bull riding with their synchronized training methods and innovative techniques. They'd studied Bodacious for months, analyzed every movement, every buck, every spin. The result? 2 of the most humiliating rides in professional rodeo history. Behind them, Rebecca Chen stood with her notepad, the only female sports reporter covering the circuit full-time. She'd witnessed each of these champions' downfalls, had interviewed them afterward as they struggled to explain how 3 years of professional experience could vanish in mere seconds. Her articles had dubbed Bodacious the career killer, and the nickname stuck. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice crackled through the speakers. "We're 30 minutes away from what might be our final attempt to conquer the most dangerous bull in professional rodeo history." The crowd's murmur grew louder. Everyone knew the story. Bodacious wasn't just any bull. He was a 1,700-pound nightmare with the intelligence of a chess master and the fury of a hurricane. His record spoke for itself. 47 attempted rides, 0 successful 8-second completions. The closest anyone had come was 4.5 seconds, and that cowboy spent 6 weeks in intensive care. Stock contractor Phil Martinez paced near the chutes, his weathered hands gripping a clipboard that listed the insurance waivers and medical clearances required for tonight's ride. Phil had raised Bodacious from a calf, watched him grow into something that defied natural explanation. The bull didn't just buck, he strategized, adapted, learned from each rider's mistakes, and adjusted accordingly. "You sure about this, Martinez?" called out Jim Bradley, the head judge. "We've got 5 ambulances on standby and the medical team is nervous as hell." Phil nodded grimly. "The kid signed all the papers, says he's been studying footage for 2 years. The kid. That's what everyone called him, though Lane Frost had already proven himself as one of the most promising riders on the circuit. At 22, he possessed an almost supernatural understanding of bull behavior and a riding style that blended classical technique with pure instinct. But understanding Bodacious and surviving him were entirely different challenges. Behind the chutes, Lane sat quietly on a hay bale, his gloved hands methodically working rosin into his riding rope. Other cowboys had approached throughout the afternoon, some offering advice, others trying to talk him out of the attempt. He'd listened politely to each, then returned to his preparation ritual. "Frost!" Tommy Morrison's voice cut through the noise as the former champion approached. His shoulder might be healing, but his pride remained shattered. "You don't have to prove anything to anybody. That bull, he's not normal. He thinks 3 moves ahead." Lane looked up, his blue eyes calm but determined. "I appreciate that, Tommy, but somebody's got to show these young riders that impossible is just another word for opportunity." The arena fell silent as the announcement echoed, "Rider up in chute number 4." The walk to chute 4 felt like a funeral march, but Lane Frost carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd found peace with his decision. Behind him, The 5 champion families watched in stunned silence as this young Oklahoma cowboy approached the most feared animal in professional sports. Bodacious snorted and shifted in the narrow chute, his massive black frame filling the space like compressed dynamite. The bull's eyes, dark, intelligent, calculating, fixed on Lane with an almost human awareness. This wasn't the wild, panicked stare of a typical rodeo bull. This was the focused gaze of a predator studying its next victim. "Easy there, partner," Lane whispered, surprising everyone by speaking directly to Bodacious as he climbed onto the chute rails. "I know what you're thinking. You've embarrassed every rider who's tried to master you, but today's different." Phil Martinez stood nearby, his face etched with concern. "Lane, this bull has ended careers. Hell, he's ended bloodlines. The Prescotts won't even look at a bull named Bodacious anymore." Lane positioned his rope, his movements deliberate and practiced. "Phil, every bull teaches you something. Some teach you humility, some teach you fear. But the great ones..." He paused, adjusting his grip. "The great ones teach you who you really are." In the stands, Rebecca Chen raised her camera, knowing she might be documenting either the greatest ride in rodeo history or the sport's most tragic moment. The Henderson brothers leaned forward, their championship rings catching the arena lights as their hands gripped the rail. "Bodacious has a pattern," Danny Prescott muttered to his father. "He starts with a high kick to the right, then spins left for exactly 3 rotations before reversing direction. That's when he launches into those impossible mid-air direction changes that no rider can anticipate." Old Jake Prescott nodded grimly. The kids studied the footage. We all did. But studying and surviving are 2 different things entirely. Lane settled onto Bodacious's broad back, feeling the bull's muscles tense beneath him like coiled springs. The animal's breathing changed, becoming deeper, more focused. Around the arena, conversations died as 20,000 spectators realized they were about to witness something extraordinary. "Timer ready," called the judge. "Medical team in position," confirmed the paramedics. Lane wrapped the rope around his gloved hand one final time, then looked up at the crowd. His eyes found the section where the 5 champion families sat, their faces a mixture of disbelief, concern, and something else. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this young cowboy could restore honor to a sport that had been dominated by one unstoppable force for too long. "You know what separates champions from legends?" Lane called out to Tommy Morrison, his voice carrying across the now silent arena. "Champions win titles. Legends change the game forever." Bodacious shifted again, his massive head turning slightly as if listening to every word. The bull's intelligence was unnerving. He seemed to understand that this ride would be different from all the others. "He's talking to the bull," whispered a young cowboy in the stands. "Nobody talks to Bodacious." Lane leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I've watched every one of your rides, big guy. Seen how you study each cowboy, learn their weaknesses, exploit their fears. But here's what you haven't faced yet. A rider who's not afraid to die trying." The Henderson brothers exchanged glances. "That's not confidence," one muttered. "That's something else entirely." Phil Martinez stepped back from the chute, his hand hovering near the gate release. "Lane, last chance to reconsider. No shame in walking away from this one." Lane's response came not in words, but in action. He raised his free hand high above his head, the traditional signal that meant only one thing. He was ready to ride. The arena fell into absolute silence, broken only by Bodacious's heavy breathing and the distant sound of ambulance engines idling. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice trembled slightly. "For 8 seconds that will either crown a new legend or claim another victim, here's Lane Frost on Bodacious." The gate swung open. What happened next defied every prediction, every analysis, every piece of conventional wisdom about bull riding. Bodacious exploded from the chute with his signature high right kick, just as the Prescotts had predicted. But instead of fighting the movement, Lane flowed with it, his body moving in perfect harmony with the bull's initial thrust. "Impossible!" Tommy Morrison gasped, rising from his seat. "He's not fighting the bull, he's dancing with him." The first 3 seconds unfolded like a masterclass in athletic poetry. Where other riders had tried to dominate Bodacious through strength and technique, Lane chose a different path entirely. He read the bull's movements not as attacks to defend against, but as a conversation to join. When Bodacious spun left, Lane anticipated and adjusted. When the bull reversed direction, the moment that had destroyed countless careers, Lane was already there, balanced and ready. 4 seconds, the announcer shouted, his voice cracking with disbelief. Lane Frost has just survived longer on Bodacious than any rider in 3 years. The Henderson brothers stood frozen, their championship experience telling them this ride should have ended already. But Lane wasn't following any conventional riding strategy they recognized. His spurring was rhythmic, almost musical, and his free hand moved with a grace that seemed to calm rather than agitate the massive animal beneath him. At 5 seconds, Bodacious attempted his most devastating move, a mid-air spin that had hospitalized the last 2 riders who'd reached this point. But something extraordinary happened. Instead of the violent, desperate buck the crowd expected, Bodacious seemed to pause, as if genuinely curious about this cowboy who moved differently than all the others. "Sweet Mother of God," whispered Rebecca Chen, her camera capturing every impossible moment. "The bull is actually responding to him." 6 seconds. 7 seconds. The arena erupted in chaos as 20,000 people realized they were witnessing history. The 5 champion families stood as one, their past humiliations forgotten in the face of something that transcended competition. The final seconds stretched like an eternity. Bodacious, as if finally accepting that he'd met his equal, completed one final, almost gentle buck before coming to a stop in the center of the arena. Lane raised both hands high above his head, then slowly dismounted, never taking his eyes off the bull who had finally been conquered. But what happened next stunned everyone even more than the ride itself. Instead of charging or trying to attack his rider, Bodacious's usual response, the great bull simply stood there, breathing heavily, and for the first time in his career, lowered his massive head in what could only be interpreted as a gesture of respect. Lane walked slowly toward Bodacious and gently placed his hand on the bull's forehead. "Thank you, partner," he said quietly. "You taught me something today about facing the impossible." The arena exploded in applause that seemed to shake the very foundation of the stadium. Tommy Morrison was the first to reach the arena floor, his injured shoulder forgotten as he embraced the young cowboy who had restored honor to their sport. The Prescott family followed, then the Henderson brothers, all of them understanding that they had witnessed something that would be talked about for generations. Phil Martinez approached with tears in his eyes, his hand extended toward Lane. "Son, in 30 years of raising bulls, I've never seen anything like that. You didn't just ride Bodacious, you communicated with him." Lane nodded, his blue eyes bright with the satisfaction of a dream fulfilled. Sometimes the greatest victories don't come from defeating your opponent. They come from understanding that you're both part of something bigger than either of you alone. As the crowd continued to cheer and the 5 champion families gathered around their new hero, one thing became clear. Lane Frost hadn't just conquered an unconquerable bull. He had proven that true legends aren't born from domination, but from the courage to approach the impossible with respect, preparation, and an unshakable belief that even the greatest challenges can teach us who we're meant to become. The age of Bodacious was over. The legend of Lane Frost had just begun.